In 1882, John H. Patterson realized a terrifying financial truth. His business was booming, yet his ledger was bleeding out. He wasn't being outmaneuvered by Wall Street titans or crushed by railroad monopolies. He was being robbed blind by the very clerks smiling at his customers. In the era of the open cash drawer, the economy suffered from a fatal flaw of asymmetric information. Clipping the till wasn't just common. It was an invisible tax. Money was a ghost, evaporating between the customer's hand and the merchant's pocket. For Patterson, this wasn't merely a leak in margins. It was a profound moral hazard. He obsessed over the theft, cooking the books of his own paranoia, viewing every employee as a potential traitor to his bottom line. To stop the hemorrhage, Patterson didn't hire the Pinkertons. He found his salvation in a heavy, brass-bound contraption invented by a frustrated saloon owner. It was called Riddy's Incorruptible Cashier. It rang a sharp, piercing bell every time a sale was made, dragging the transaction out of the shadows and into the glaring light of public accountability. It wasn't just a noisemaker. It was an acoustic alarm. Inside, a paper roll kept an unalterable audit trail. It was the world's first mechanical conscience. Patterson didn't just buy 2 machines. He bought the entire company for $6,500. The bankers and merchants of Dayton called him a fool, seeing only a clunky novelty. Patterson saw a weapon. He saw a mechanism to systematize honesty and, more importantly, to strictly govern human behavior. He rebranded it the National Cash Register Company, or NCR, and launched a crusade that permanently altered the DNA of the American workplace. To Patterson, the register was a cure for the inherent disease of the working class. But the market didn't know it was sick.
Coin.
Merchants balked at the steep price, and clerks despised the machines because they killed the easy graft. To move inventory nobody wanted, Patterson realized he couldn't sell brass gears and bells. He had to sell fear. He had to sell the merchant the absolute terror of being robbed from within. And he had to sell the world on an entirely new paradigm of ruthless discipline. This was the genesis of the hunger. Patterson operated in a state of perpetual, manufactured crisis, demanding that same raw anxiety from his men. He didn't want salesmen. He wanted militant evangelists of the ledger. He built a culture where the individual was entirely subservient to the process. By establishing the first formal sales school, he created an environment of strict performance theater, where every word was scripted and every movement was monitored. He was a pioneer of Taylorism before the term existed, realizing that if you control the input, the script, the attire, the very psychology of your workforce. You guarantee the output. He was constructing a human machine. The first casualties were the autonomy and peace of mind of anyone drawing an NCR paycheck. The grind was born, and the salesman's guillotine was quietly being sharpened in the shadows of the factory floor. If you have ever felt the cold sweat of an approaching end-of-quarter deadline or the phantom pressure of a monthly target, you are living in a psychological cage that John H. Patterson built, brick by brick. He didn't just want your labor. He demanded total yield extraction. In 1887, he codified this obsession into a document that became the holy text for every high-pressure sales floor, from Wall Street boiler rooms to Silicon Valley server farms. The NCR Primer. Before the primer, sales was a dark art built on charisma, whiskey, and handshakes. Patterson turned it into a lethal, replicable factory line. He recognized that human beings are variables, and variables are the sworn enemies of profit. So, he ruthlessly eliminated the variable. The primer was a 16-page manual of weaponized psychology that every NCR salesman was mandated to memorize. Word for word, gesture for gesture. Straying from the script didn't earn a correction. It earned an immediate liquidation event. Patterson understood that if you control the exact phrasing, you control the financial outcome. This wasn't a pitch. It was a financial autopsy. The mechanism of the NCR sale was an elegant, inescapable trap. The salesman didn't walk in and ask if the merchant wanted to buy a register. He asked how much the clerk stole yesterday. Then he did the math out loud. $10 a week. 52 weeks. 5 years. Suddenly, the machine didn't cost $50. It saved $2,600. Patterson wasn't selling hardware. He was selling a guaranteed return on distrust. It was a closed loop where the merchant bought a mirror, reflecting exactly how much his own employees were bleeding him dry. But Patterson's most chilling innovation was the quota. In the early 1890s, he realized that a man who feels he has earned enough is a man who stops pushing. In the Gospel of Capital Noir, enough is the ultimate sin. He carved up the map of the United States into strictly defined territories, treating the geography of America like a grid for human capital arbitrage. He assigned each territory a quota, a specific, unrelenting, mathematically calculated number of machines that absolutely must be sold. The quota wasn't a target. It was a synthetic market. Patterson created artificial scarcity through limited territories, fixed demand, and perpetually rising expectations. It didn't care about recessions, blizzards, or family tragedies. It was a cold shadow following the salesman home. If you hit your number, your valuation went up and your quota increased the next month. If you missed it, your stock plummeted. Long before Wall Street priced companies, Patterson was pricing human beings. To give this anxiety a physical architecture, he established the 100-Point Club in 1906. It was an elite, gold-plated circle for those who hit their metrics, rewarding them with lavish conventions. But for every man drinking champagne, there were 10 more shivering on the below quota list. Their names were published in the company newsletter, a public shaming designed to enforce a brutal attrition rate. When Patterson wanted you gone, he utilized a technique he dubbed the process of evaporation. This was the genesis of constructive dismissal. He didn't just fire people. He made their daily existence so deeply humiliating that they simply ceased to exist within the corporate ecosystem. He would order an executive's desk moved into the middle of a busy hallway or out onto the front lawn, leaving them to bake in the sun, while colleagues walked past in deafening silence. In one legendary display of cruelty, he fired a man by having his desk and chair dragged out to the company scrap heap and set ablaze. The message was unmistakable. At NCR, you were either a high-velocity gear generating revenue, or you were fuel for the furnace. Visualize the sheer scale of this psychological pressure. In 1900, Patterson was burning through $100,000 a year on advertising, a staggering fortune that could have purchased a fleet of steamships. He flooded the market, sometimes burying a single merchant under 18 pieces of direct mail in 1 month. He engineered a tidal wave of demand that his salesmen were expected to surf or be drowned by. He didn't want to capture market share. He wanted to become the market itself. He even weaponized the physical architecture of the NCR headquarters in Dayton, known as the Hilltop. It was constructed with massive glass windows, not to let in the sunlight, but to ensure supervisors could observe every worker at every passing second. It was a true panopticon of productivity. He offered free lunches, on-site doctors, and mandatory exercise classes. This wasn't corporate charity. It was calculated maintenance. A healthy, well-fed worker simply provided a higher return on investment. It was the world's first corporate campus, a gilded cage where your diet, your health, and your social life were leveraged assets owned entirely by the company. This ruthlessness wasn't a personality defect. It was a deeply optimized business strategy. Patterson understood that keeping his men in a state of perpetual, controlled crisis extracted a volume of effort a comfortable man would never surrender. He transformed the American workplace into a theater of psychological torment, where your status reset to 0 every 30 days. You were only as valuable as your last decimal point, and the guillotine was permanently suspended over the floor, waiting for the slightest drop in momentum. This was the exact engine that drove NCR to control 95% of the global cash register market by 1910. Patterson conquered the world's money, but the currency he spent was the collective nervous system of his workforce. The blade of the guillotine didn't just fall on the foot soldiers in the field. It was forged to decapitate the generals in the boardroom. John H. Patterson's ultimate legacy wasn't a brass machine. It was a bloodline of corporate ruthlessness that still pumps through the veins of every major Fortune 500 company operating today. He didn't just build a highly profitable business. He built a school for apex predators. By 1910, analysts estimated that fully 1/6 of all major American corporate executives were NCR alumni, hardened men who had survived the crucible of the hilltop and carried Patterson's cold, scripted gospel deep into the 20th century. The most famous survivor was a man named Thomas J. Watson. For years, Watson served as Patterson's right hand, the star pupil who mastered the dark art of the hard sell and the ruthless enforcement of the quota. But in the world of capital noir, loyalty is a rapidly depreciating asset. In 1914, Patterson decided his top lieutenant had become too powerful, too much of an individual and not enough of a compliant gear. He fired Watson with the exact same clinical detachment he used to discard a faulty spring. But Patterson thought he was just building a company. He was wrong. He had engineered a virus. And in 1914, that virus escaped the lab. Watson didn't just retreat. He took the entire NCR operating system with him.
We must secure it.
He took the primer, the forced uniforms, the artificial scarcity of the territories, and the relentless obsession with metrics. He installed that exact psychological software into a new machine, building a little company called IBM. The blue-suited, metric-obsessed, high-pressure corporate culture that defined the American century wasn't a spontaneous evolution. It was the ghost of Dayton, Ohio, heavily rewritten for the computer age. You might sit there thinking you are entirely safe, because you don't hawk brass machines door to door. But take a hard look at your inbox. Look at the key performance indicators that dictate your bonus, your mortgage approval, and your baseline peace of mind. When your manager casually places you on a performance improvement plan or a PIP, they are not acting as a mentor trying to help you succeed. They are engaging in a modern, legally sanitized execution of Patterson's process of evaporation. The mechanism is identical. First, they establish a metric designed from its inception to be a moving target. Second, they document your inevitable failure with the cold, unblinking precision of a 1900-era ledger. And third, they usher you to the exit, ensuring the corporate machine keeps humming without the expensive friction of your humanity. We have traded the brass bell for the digital notification, but the grim music remains exactly the same. It is the sound of a system infected with incentive misalignment, viewing you entirely as a line item to be optimized, or a liability to be erased. Patterson died in 1922, but his guillotine never stopped falling. He proved a dark economic theorem that modern human resources departments absolutely refuse to admit out loud. Toxic, fear-based management is fundamentally more profitable than empathy. He showed the world that if you measure a human being by a decimal point for long enough, they will eventually start to believe that is all they are worth. We are living inside the script he wrote. An endless loop where productivity is the only recognized virtue, and the word enough has been completely scrubbed from the dictionary. So, slow your breath for a moment and look at the glowing screen you use to track your daily life. Ask yourself, are you the one using the machine? Or are you just another transaction being rung up in a ledger you aren't allowed to see? Is your modern performance review actually measuring your work? Or is it just the legal department's meticulously crafted audit trail, training you to become infinitely easier to replace? Let me know in the comments exactly how your last performance review went. Because history shows us that the bell always rings, the drawer always opens, and something is always taken that can never, ever be replaced.